Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Jenaya Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And we would like to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast if you're enjoying yourself here as we continue, even as the losses pile up, to do an episode every week here. Kind of like a group therapy session, which I'm sure we all could use right now after yet another loss, this time to the lowly Columbus Blue Jackets in overtime on Tuesday night. Yep, no way of really sugarcoating it here right now, folks. It just is what it is at this point, as the Caps' margin for error in the playoff race, which was already razor thin, just continues to get even thinner as the losses pile up. So losses in terms of losing players to injuries, losses in terms of the scoreboard and the standings, you name it. If you can lose it, the Caps have lost it this season. It's been a rough one, folks. Like I said, really no way of sugarcoating it. Just a tough season, besieged by injuries, and then, of course, waving goodbye to some longtime fan favorites at the trade deadline as well. And now the season is winding down with the Caps still on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. But you know what? We're not going to get too overly negative here right now. Shit happens, and shit has happened to the Caps this season. And you know what? That's just how it's going to go sometimes. You'll have a season every once in a while where absolutely everything that could go wrong does go wrong. And that has been this season right now for the Washington Capitals. So absolutely nothing has gone right. If you have watched this season closely, you know that for sure. Everything from a historical amount of injuries to their star players, to, their captain's beloved father passing away suddenly, to things in-game and on the ice, like seemingly every coach's challenge going against them, every call at every critical moment going against them, right up until this most recent overtime against the Columbus Blue Jackets, when the Blue Jackets were, for some reason, allowed to play with 4 guys on the ice during a 3-on-3 overtime period. I don't know what the referees think that 3-on-3 means, but to me that means 3 guys on the ice for each side. So Columbus Blue Jackets had 4 guys on the ice, they weren't called for it, and they scored immediately afterwards. So that's just kind of the way that things have been going this season for the Caps. It's just seemed, like I said, that at every single turn, whenever something could go wrong, it has. And you know what? Like, when we're talking about injuries specifically, I don't really buy the whole no excuses bit that some fans like to regurgitate like a bad tequila shot. I buy it to a certain extent, of course. Like, certainly during any season, there's going to be some adversity that you are going to face, and that you're going to have to overcome. And you know what? Like, more times than not, the Capitals do overcome it. That's why they had made the playoffs for 8 straight seasons heading into this one, because they are pretty good and have been pretty good at the whole dealing with adversity thing. But there is a limit to everything, right? And as we've already talked about on this show, the Capitals' injury situation this season has quite literally been historically bad. They've had the most amount of injuries to the highest scoring players and the most man games lost due to injuries of any team in NHL history, at least since the NHL started keeping stats for such things. So to say, like, no excuses for where they sit in the standings this season, like, no, sorry. I just don't buy it, personally. They should actually probably, in all likelihood, be way further out of the playoff picture with the injuries that they have had. Honestly, like, it's been somewhat of a miracle that they were able to stay in it for as long as they did. I think you can survive an injury or two to a key player or two, of course, for parts of the season. And the Caps have done that on several occasions in the past. But I don't think it's at all realistic to expect a team to survive missing as many top players as the Caps have for as long as the Caps have, and to still come out in the top 8 of what is a historically good Eastern Conference this season as well. Like, I'm sorry, it's just not realistic. So let's just call it what it is. It's an injury-plagued, lost season, and let's just leave it at that. There's really no need to overreact or to panic. The Caps will be good again next season, provided that they can stay at least somewhat healthy. They will be good again, you guys, I promise you. You can mark that down and bring it back to me next season. At the end of next season, we'll see where we're at, where the Caps stand in the standings, because I am betting that it will be a short one season only hiatus from the postseason for the Capitals. They are going to be good again next season. It's a good roster that got completely shit on by the injury bug, so hopefully next season the injury bug will get bored, move on to somebody else for the sake of all of our sanity. I cannot take another season like this. So many guys out of the lineup, not getting to watch so many of our favorite players play. And, I do feel pretty bad in a way for Caps head coach Peter Laviolette as well, because he really hasn't had a healthy lineup really since he's been here at all. Like, the last time that the Caps were actually healthy was when Todd Reirden was the head coach. So, Lavi's definitely kind of gotten the short end of the stick in that department. He had, back-to-back first rounds in the playoffs where the Caps had several players either out of the lineup entirely or else they were in the lineup but they were playing on one leg, right? And now he's had a full season of that this season, and they're likely not even going to make the playoffs because of it. So I definitely do feel for him in that regard, and I think he actually did a pretty admirable job of guiding the Caps through that for as long as he could. But it is pretty hard to do it for a full 82-game season, to get away with icing half of the Hershey Bears roster as part of your NHL lineup every single night. And as we said, in a historically stacked Eastern Conference as well. So as we highlighted in last week's episode, I think that the injury to number one defenseman John Carlson was the straw that really finally broke the camel's back. That was kind of the one that they just could not recover from, as John does so much in so many different areas of the ice. He is irreplaceable, and that's not the coach's fault. So, listen, I don't know if Peter Laviolette is going to be back as head coach of this team next season. I don't know if he should be back as head coach of this team next season. I don't think, like I said, that this is his fault where we're at right now. For this season, but I also think that, given his contract situation right now, his contract, if you didn't know, is up at the end of this season, so the Caps would need to actually extend him in order for him to be back again next season. And just given where the team is in the standings right now, missing the playoffs for the first time in 9 years, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be an easy sell to the fan base to extend his contract at this point in time. Which is kind of pretty unfortunate timing for him, really, that his contract happens to be up the same season that his team is, injured 7 ways to Sunday. But I just think that, whether that's fair or not, that it is going to be a pretty tough sell to the general fan base, extending him and keeping him around after this season. To those casual fans, right? People who kind of maybe don't necessarily follow the team so closely, but who, go to some games, spend money on tickets, things like that. Maybe they're not aware fully of just how bad the Caps injury situation is. It's always easy to blame the coach. But yeah, I just think it is going to be a pretty tough sell to, like I said, the general fan base to extend him and to keep him around after this season. So, but for me, my question would also be that if you're not going to extend him, then who's going to replace him, right? Because the replacement option has to be better than what you currently have. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. We don't need, another Dale Hunter, Adam Oates, Todd Reirden situation, right? Please, God, no. We don't need to be taking a step back. We can't afford it right now during the last, 3 to 5 years or whatever of the Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom era in DC. The goal is to win another Stanley Cup right now, and you have a relatively short window in which to do it. So you can't afford to be wasting a year or two of that, as they did with Todd Reirden at the helm, trying out an unproven coach who's not going to get you any farther than his predecessor did. But the one guy that I do wonder about personally, and who, I would like as a replacement option, and who I've talked about on this show before, the possibility of him being the future head coach of the Caps, that's Spencer Carberry, the former head coach of the Capitals AHL affiliate, the Hershey Bears, who is now currently an assistant coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the NHL, running their offense and running their power play. To me, he would be a really interesting option to replace Laviolette, should the Caps choose, like I said, not to bring back Laviolette. Carberry is probably one of the only quote unquote unproven coaches who I would seriously consider to replace Lavi, as I just think he'd be a really good fit. Like, he knows a lot of the younger players on the Caps already, having coached a lot of them when they were members of the Hershey Bears, and so he'd be just a good guy to kind of help bring them into the NHL and into being impact players at the NHL level. He's had success with a lot of these guys before, so just kind of bring them along, help develop them, and like I said, turn them into impact players at the NHL level, just as they were impact players at the AHL level under Spencer Carberry. So I think that that's a really easy, natural fit as the Caps get a little bit younger here for next season, and for, of course, the seasons beyond as well. Guys like Ovechkin, Backstrom, Oshie, Wilson, Carlson, etc., these guys are pros, right? Like, they're professionals through and through. They're veterans of the game and of the league who are going to succeed under any coach you throw at them. So for me, you already know what you're going to get out of the Ovechkins, the Backstroms, the Oshies, etc. So for me, it's more about finding a coach who can get the most out of the young players, who can, give them that confidence to succeed at the NHL level, who can bring them along, like I said, and develop them into what you want them to be at the NHL level. That's what's going to turn this team into a true contender again, is filling out around the Ovechkins, the Backstroms, the Oshies, the Wilsons, the Carlsons, the Kuznetsovs, with young players who can contribute, who can make an impact at the NHL level in a meaningful way that helps you win games and win playoff series. So, looking ahead to next season and beyond, the Caps already have a lot of really good young players for now and for the future. They already got Dylan Strome and Sonny Milano both locked up to contract extensions. How good has Dylan Strome been since he signed that extension? My goodness. And then they made the trade, of course, for Rasmus Sandin, who at 23 years old and with a record-setting 12 points in his first 9 games as a Capital, looks like he is going to be a Capital for a long, long, long time. They've got guys like Martin Feravari, Alexei Protas, who draws a lot of comparisons to Tage Thompson back when Thompson first came into the league. You remember Thompson, he had all of these raw tools, the size and everything, but his potential was pretty untapped early on in the first few years of his career, and so much so that he actually got traded. He was traded, and now he's about to be a 50-goal scorer. So a lot of comparisons being made between Thompson when he first came into the league and Alexei Protas right now. All of the raw tools are there, including, of course, the behemoth size. Protas is already, I believe, 6'6", 225 pounds at just 22 years old. He just turned 22 back in January. And they've got, Alexander Alexeyev, Vinny Iorio, Beck Malenstein, Connor McMichael, Hendrix Lapierre, Ethan Frank, who are all likely to factor into the mix for next season at the NHL level. Former first-round pick Lucas Johansson, he got some games up at the Caps this season. And even looking past just next season, you've got a couple of A-plus prospects coming up in Ivan Miroshnichenko and Alexander Suzdalev, a couple of forwards who are projected to make an impact for sure at the NHL level. In fact, in Miroshnichenko's case, it's projected to be a massive impact at the NHL level. He should probably be considered an A+++ prospect, if we're being honest here. And then they've got prospects like Ryan Hoffer as well, who the Caps really like. They just signed him to a 3-year entry-level contract. Bogdan Triniev, an absolute beast of a winger who they like so much that they just had him come over from Russia early in order to start getting some games in North America on the North American ice. He's on a 3-year entry-level contract. And even guys, like Joe Snively, hometown kid, Henrik Bjorkström, hell, even Nicholas Aube-Kubel. These guys are not old. They're still young players, and there's still likely a lot of untapped potential there. Particularly a guy like Aube-Kubel, the more I watch this guy play, the more I just love him. We've seen him play on the Caps' fourth line this season, but he clearly has the speed in the hands to move up the lineup if he can get a coach in here who can, if we can get a coach in here who can teach a guy like Aube-Kubel to just unlock his offensive tools just a little bit more. Aube-Kubel could be a hell of a player. I'm telling you right now, he's got all of the tools. He's got the speed. He's got the hands. He gets more scoring chances for himself than just about any player I've seen. If he figures out how to start burying some of those chances, watch the fuck out, dude. He will be a hell of a player. And he's got that physical side to his game too, which I love. He's always first in and hard on the forecheck. Love the player. So as I said, like if you can get a coach in here, and I think a guy like Spencer Carberry could very well be that guy. If you can get a coach in here who can kind of bring some of these young players along, teach them some things while also simultaneously giving them that boost of confidence that so many young players often need when first starting out in the NHL, and just help develop them in real time, right? Like help them become what you want them to be, what you know that they can be at the NHL level, and just help them reach their potential. Because to me, like that's what's going to help take this Caps team to the next level, that next level where we all want them to be, which is to be not a first round exit, but to be a true contender for another Stanley Cup, going deep in the playoffs every single year and having a chance to win, a real chance. I kind of got a bit off track there. I went off on a bit of a coaching tangent, but I'm sure that that's something that will need to be decided upon in the not so distant future anyways. So I'm sure we will be talking about that more, the Caps coaching situation. But for now, this season, how are you all feeling about what's gone down this season? Like, what are the vibes like from where you're sitting? I want to know. Let me know in the comment section. How are you feeling? For me, I do think that the injury to Darcy Kuemper was probably the final nail in the coffin on the Caps season, on their dwindling playoff hopes. The way that Charlie Lindgren has played in these last few games that Kuemper has been out. And to be clear, I'm not really blaming it on Lindgren because, he hadn't played, right? Like, he hadn't played many games at all in a long-ass time. Laviolette and the rest of the coaching staff had him stapled to the bench. So, obviously, he's going to be rusty as hell. He hasn't played. So, I'm not blaming Chucky per se. I really like Chucky. But all I'm saying is that the way that Chucky has played these last few games, where the Caps really needed the standings points in order to stay in the playoff race, the way that Chucky has played, they didn't even really have a chance in any of these games, right? Against Columbus in the most recent one, you score 6 goals. You score 6 goals. You should win the game. You have a 3-goal lead. You should win the game. Against the worst team in the league, I might add, or one of the worst teams at least. You have a 3-goal lead. You should win the game. You score the go-ahead goal with 4 minutes left in the game. You should win the game. You have a lead with 45 seconds left in the game. You should win the game. So there's some blame to go around in terms of the defense in front of Chucky, for sure. But that's, like we've talked about, that's kind of to be expected with so many regular blue liners out of the lineup still. John Carlson's still out, although he very well could be back for the next game against Chicago. That's the latest on him. But yeah, John Carlson's still been out. Nick Jensen just finally returned to the lineup last game. He's missed, good chunks of this last part of the season here. We have really missed him. Very dependable top 4 defenseman. Trevor Van Riemsdyk, he missed last game too. So at some point with a very young defensive corps due to all of these injuries, at some point you need your goalie to make a save, right? That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying this as a goaltender myself. It's hard for me to say that, to put any blame on the goalie. I don't like doing it, but at some point you do need your goalie to make a save. I know that probably Charlie Lindgren is probably blaming himself too, because that's what us goalies do. Whenever I let in a goal, it's always my fault. So, and again, I'm not really I'm not blaming Lindgren, because I think that the way that the coaching staff has utilized him this season has been laughable, really, to say the least. Running Darcy Kuemper into the ground, even against weaker opponents, when you have a very capable backup goaltender sitting on the bench ready to provide rest to your number one guy, it just makes no sense to me. When Kuemper got injured earlier in the season, because this is the second time that he's been injured this season, when he got injured earlier in the season, back in December, Charlie Lindgren completely carried this team. He saved us. The Caps were 11-2-2 through the month of December, and that was basically all Charlie Lindgren. He's very capable. He's a very good goaltender. But then Kuemper got healthy, and all of a sudden, it's as if the coaching staff entirely forgot that Charlie Lindgren does, in fact, still exist. Like, I believe Lindgren was something like 9-1 in his last 10 games when Kuemper returned to the lineup earlier in the season. And yet, instead of continuing to ride the hot hand, which to me seemed like the obvious choice, just play the guy until he finally loses a game. He was as hot as any goalie in the whole league at that point. But instead of doing that, instead of continuing to ride the hot hand in Lindgren, the coaching staff inexplicably decided to staple his ass to the bench, forced Kuemper to play every single game unless it was a back-to-back, and sometimes even during back-to-backs as well. That's pretty much when the season started going downhill, wasn't it? Look at the timeline. And yes, I know that timeline also coincides with the injury to number one defenseman John Carlson. I know that. But I'm just saying, like, when you have a goaltender who's barely lost a game at all in the last month plus, maybe, I don't know, play that guy, maybe? Like, give him some ice time? Let him out of his cage on the bench for some fresh air and sunshine every once in a while? Christ, I don't know. What do I know? I'm just a fan. But that would have seemed like the obvious course of action to me. Just a fan. So anyways, Caps captain, I'm getting too wound up there talking about the goaltending, as I always do. But anyways, Caps captain Alex Ovechkin, at least he's still giving us fans plenty to cheer about. That's an evergreen fact, really. Like, I will take things that are always true for 500, Alex. Some things never change. And Alex Ovechkin's undeniable greatness is one of those things. Ovi is still out there being Ovi, even as the team around him trips over their own feet. Tuesday night against Columbus, Ovi scored his 40th goal of the season in just his 66th game. You will remember, of course, that he missed some games, understandably, when his father Mikhail passed away, and he also missed a couple more due to a lower body injury that has been nagging him this season. So even playing on one leg, Ovi has scored 40 plus goals in a season once again, for a whopping 13th time, by the way, in his NHL career, which is an NHL record. So, and by the way, this is a career for Ovi that is obviously still very much ongoing. Like, he's still doing this. He's still scoring 40, 50 goals every single season. So probably would have had, he's on pace for 46 right now, even though he hasn't played, like I said, every game this season. He probably would have had 50 again this season if he hadn't missed any games. Just unfortunate what happened with his dad there, obviously, and obviously understandable that he would miss that time. But if not, he probably would have had 50 goals again. He was on pace for it. So, and what's extra special about it being the 13th time that Ovi has scored 40 plus is that the NHL record for 40 goal seasons was, until Tuesday night, co-held by Wayne Gretzky and Ovechkin, with, of course, 12 40-goal seasons apiece. So any time that you were passing Wayne Gretzky in anything, it is a very good night. So with his 13th 40-goal season, Ovechkin now has overtaken Wayne Gretzky, and he has taken sole possession of that NHL record. So like I said, anytime that you're knocking off the great one, Wayne Gretzky, it's a good night. So another Gretzky record falls at the hands of Alex Ovechkin, and as we all know, it likely will not be the last, nor will it be the most significant. We all know what's next on Ovi's agenda there in terms of Gretzky records. So, so I'm just going to, I just want to rattle off a list here of all of the other accomplishments, all of the other milestones, all of the other NHL records that Ovechkin has taken over so far this season. And to be clear, this is just this season only. So here we go. So in early November, Ovi scored goal number 787, which passed Mr. Hockey himself, Gordie Howe, for the NHL record of the most goals scored with one single franchise. And obviously, seeing as how Ovi is and continues to be a Capital, and he will be a Capital, of course, for life, every goal that he has scored since that record-breaking day in November, and every goal that he will score here as we continue on with him as a member of the Washington Capitals moving forward, he just continues with every goal now to re-break his own record and put it more and more and more out of reach for the guys who will come after him. So all of his goals have been and will continue to be scored as a member of the Washington Capitals. He's up to 820 of them now after his 40th of the season the other night. So most goals with one franchise. That is impressive. And also in November, he broke the NHL record, also previously held by Wayne Gretzky, another Gretzky record, for the most goals scored on the road with his 403rd career road goal. He continues to add to that total seemingly every game that the Caps play on the road as well. You know, over and over and over again, like I said, just breaking his own record at this point with every road goal that he scores. He's passed Jaromir Jagr for the most game opening goals in NHL history. He's passed Gordie Howe again for second all time in game winning goals. I know that is a record that matters a lot to Ovechkin because those are goals that directly, have won the game for his team, which is what he cares about. He cares about winning games. So he passed Gordie Howe for second all time in game winning goals. And only Jaromir Jagr remains ahead of him on that list. And he could catch Jagr in that regard as soon as next season. On December 13th, he had a hat trick for goals number 798, 799, and 800, becoming, of course, just the third player in NHL history to score 800 goals. The other two, of course, being Wayne Gretzky and Gordie Howe. And then just a few days later, he scored goals number 801 and 802, officially moving him past Gordie Howe into second all-time on the NHL's all-time goals list. Only Wayne Gretzky remains. Wayne Gretzky himself is the only one who remains ahead of Ovi on that all-time list, probably the biggest and most prestigious all-time list that there is in hockey. And as we mentioned, Ovi is now already at 820 goals, just 74 back of Wayne Gretzky, with 3 years still remaining on Ovi's contract after this season. So as it stands right now, even if he didn't score another goal at all for the remainder of this season, which, still has another 10 games remaining, even if he didn't score at all for the rest of the season, he would still only need to average just under 25 goals per season for the remainder of his current contract, which isn't even guaranteed, by the way, to be his last contract with the Capitals. But that's what he would need to do over these next 3 years of his current contract in order to catch Wayne Gretzky for the most goals in NHL history. Crazy stuff. 25 goals per season he needs to average as of right now, if he doesn't score at all, like I said, for the remainder of this current season. Babes, Alex Ovechkin could score 25 goals per season if he was blindfolded and playing with one arm tied behind his back. I'm just saying. Anyways, earlier this season, he also broke the NHL record for the most shots on goal all time, taking that record from Ray Bourque and doing it in roughly 300 fewer games than it took Bourque to do it. That's crazy. And I know, I'm missing a bunch of these records here, but there's just too many to keep track of these days when it comes to Ovechkin. You literally need a notebook to be able to write them down every day, because every goal that he scores these days, every point that he tallies, is always breaking some sort of all-time record. It's crazy. I know he's also set a bunch of records this season for scoring by a player his age as well. And, in many cases, like I said, he's just breaking his own records that he set himself, the season before. Because the only person in NHL history who has done what a 36-year-old Alex Ovechkin could do is a 37-year-old Alex Ovechkin. That's the only guy who's as good as a 36-year-old Alex Ovechkin is a 37-year-old Alex Ovechkin. So he's literally just breaking his own records at this point in a lot of these cases. And I know he's also set a lot of NHL records this season for scoring in all types of different situations. For example, we touched on how he took the NHL record for game opening goals from Jaromir Jagr. So there's been a lot of those types of records for Ovi this season as well. Like I said, too many to count. If we were to, there's just too many to run through, man. If we were to go through all of them, we would be here all day and night. this episode would be 12 hours long. Nobody wants to listen to me talk for 12 hours, right? So instead, we will just say that Alex Ovechkin is extremely good at hockey, and he gives us a reason always to keep tuning in, to keep watching, even when the rest of the team is going to shit out there. Ovechkin, he still makes it fun, right? Never take him for granted, Caps fans. I know you don't. I know I don't have to tell you, but it's just a reminder. Never take him for granted at all. No matter what, we will never see anything like this ever again. I can promise you that. So just don't take it for granted, man. Soak it all in every moment. Don't turn off the game. Even if they're losing 5-0, don't miss an OV goal, right? Like we might be losing 5-0. We might end up losing 5-1, but if Ovechkin scores the goal, you don't want to miss it. Just don't miss an OV goal. You don't want to miss history, because this will all be over before you know it, before you can blink. Time flies by too fast sometimes, and hell, like it's already been 18 years of this guy filling the nets of the opposition. It goes by fast, man. So don't blink, Caps fans, or you might miss something spectacular, something once in a lifetime. That's all I'm going to say. And besides, like I said, the team is going to be good again next season. You can count on that. It has been a tough season. We're not trying to deny that. Everyone's been injured. Everything's gone wrong. But they will get healthy. They'll come back strong for next season. And guess what? They did the right things at the trade deadline this season. They made a lot of smart moves that are going to set them up for now and for the future. So really, like, there's lots to look forward to if you're a Caps fan in the short term and in the long term. And as always, babes, we will be right here celebrating the wins and suffering through the losses right there with you. We do this together. It is a team sport. So thank you all so much for listening. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. We will be here every week through thick and thin, and we love having you all here. You all are what makes the show fun. I love talking hockey with you all. So thank you all so much again. And until next time, babes, as always, let's go Caps.